A quick warning, this episode contains discussions of domestic and intimate partner violence. Please check the show notes for a more detailed description, and take care of yourself. Thanks for listening.
On the front lines of Milwaukee's domestic and intimate partner violence crisis is a group of culturally specific organizations that are each in their own tailor-made way lending a helping hand. You could call them the Justice League of DV.
Many victims of domestic and intimate partner violence don't seek services outside of their communities.
Could we throw out a bat signal to let them know that there's somewhere you can go to get help?
That's Sean Muhammad of the Asha Project, the first culturally specific organization in the city that launched in the 80s after discovering that mainstream touchpoints weren't adapting to the needs of Milwaukee's Black community.
Many more culturally specific organizations have come on the scene since then. The group is known as We Are Here MKE. They serve many diverse communities, including Black, Latinx, Muslim, Native, Hmong, and the LGBTQ+.
Because every culture, every community experiences domestic and sexual violence and needs a safe, trusted place to turn.
From Milwaukee PBS with support from the International Women's Media Foundation,
This is The Missing Piece,
an investigative podcast series about domestic violence cases in Milwaukee County.
a growing crisis.
Unprecedented numbers of people, mainly women, losing their lives.
We're taking a deep dive on how we got here.
And what is being done to save lives and restore peace.
We're your hosts, Alexandria Mack.
And Scotty Lee Myers.
Episode 5, We Are Here MKE.
Okay, you recording? Okay.
So this is our Buju sign. Buju means hello in Ojibwe. I'm Ojibwe, as you may know. I think what I love about it is it's like huge, and I don't see any other languages represented here, so it makes me feel particularly proud. But the pieces of it that I think most people resonate with, even if you don't speak Ojibwe, is that you recognize like feathers, you recognize the medicine wheel, there's a dream catcher in there, and it's just beautiful. Huge.
This is Elena
One of my favorite
Hanks.
pieces
She's
I've
giving
always
us a tour of the Gerald L. Ignace Indian Health Center on the Milwaukee South Side.
I'll give you
She's
all
the
a quick
Deputy
tour.
Director of
This is
Child
the
and Family Services. The Buju sign she's describing is just one of the indicators that this is a space created by and for Native people.
The Gerald L. Ignace Indian Health Center grew out of a need to address poor health outcomes of Milwaukee's Native American community. That was in 1970. Since then, the center has tripled in size. Besides the medical clinic, it houses a pharmacy, dental clinic, behavioral health center, and a fitness center staffed with a physical therapist.
The critical reason why we exist here in Milwaukee. I'm not from here. I moved here from South Dakota probably about 5-6 years ago, and moving into like a new city, the first thing I look for is a space like this. And I think the difference, you can feel it the minute you walk in.
We sat down with Elena and two of her colleagues to talk more about their work with Native people experiencing domestic or intimate partner violence.
My name is Deborah Black. I'm a Citizen Wahpeton Uyate Enrolled Tribal Member. I'm the Director of Behavioral Health, and I have been at the Gerald L. Ignace Indian Health Center for 13 years. We see a lot of clients or, community members that are survivors of violence. And a lot of times they're survivors of violence across the lifespan at a very young age to having now relationship violence in their adulthood.
Studies show that more than 4 out of 5 American Indian and Alaska Native adults have experienced some form of violence in their lifetime. And non-Hispanic Black and Native women are killed at nearly 3 times the rate of non-Hispanic white women.
I mean, it's lifelong. My parents were, my mom, my dad, they beat each other. My grandmother beat my grandfather. So it's been generation after generation. It's been there. I left my first husband for domestic violence. And so it's a lived experience as well that way, in that aspect.
This is Carrie Scott Haney.
So I'm Anishinaabe from many Ojibwe nations, a descendant of Leech Lake, Minnesota, and Lac du Flambeau, Wisconsin, and the coordinator of violence prevention and response.
She's been working at the health center for about 2 years, and every day, without fail, you can expect to see her wearing a special color.
Well, I wear purple every day.
Every single day. She came in wearing black one day, and I was like, where's your purple? And she was like, right here.
A purple shirt, purple nails, purple phone case. But it's not just because she happens to like the color.
It's for domestic awareness. So in October, it was 6 years. It was Purple Thursday after the year anniversary of the year after I lost my daughter in 2018. So I've been wearing purple ever since that Purple Thursday. I'm like, Purple Thursday? Okay, well, let me figure this out. And I said, I'm gonna do that. And then I've been doing it ever since Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I sleep in purple.
Carrie also took that grief and transformed it into a new purpose, pivoting from a 25-year career in carpentry to going back to school for a degree in social work, hoping to save lives like her daughter's.
So I transferred over into social work because I'm going to save the world from DV. I look at them as they are relatives and that they need help, and how I treat them how I would want to be treated, but more so how they want to be treated, whether they know it or not. Sometimes they don't know it. So being trauma-informed is meeting people where they're at. And some of them need their hands held, and others, they're able to cross the street. They just need point the finger or your lips in their language.
And a language isn't just words. Sometimes it's just someone who can relate to where you come from, understand the context of your identity without over-explanation.
One of the bigger problems we have with law enforcement and other agencies overall is that our people are often misidentified. Like, I went to the hospital and I left and I looked at my after visit summary and it said I was white. And I turned around, I went back, I was like, I need this changed. Like, that's not at all who I am. I don't know what you saw, but that's not me. And it's because nobody cares to ask.
And our people, we don't have a color to our skin. We have a spectrum, which is around this table. And yeah, so, a lot. That's why they are being identified as white, because they look white. They are being identified as black because they look black. They are being identified as Hispanic because maybe I do look Hispanic, but nobody asks.
But really, just the field of domestic violence, like the landscape of this field overall would look different if there was no Antonia Drew Norton. We may not even have other agencies.
This is Sean Muhammad. He leads the men's services programs at the ASHA Project.
ASHA is known nationally as one of the first, a lot of people say it was the first culturally specific domestic violence program for African American populations, and we're evidence-based.
That's Antonia Drew Norton, the founder and director of the ASHA Project, a community-based program specifically for Black victims of domestic abuse, sexual assault, and sex trafficking. She's considered a pioneer in the DV advocacy field for her work in culturally specific care for victims. We heard from her in episode 1.
A lot of time and years was spent looking at our model. Our publication in 2003, the CDC backed the National Resource Center in developing and publishing our model and making sure that it got out there. And it was one of the top publications developing culturally specific services, ASHA Family Services. And it wasn't specifically written for any particular service, so a number of programs could use it.
And while in 2024, conversations about representation in various sectors are on the rise, when Antonia was starting out, trauma care tailored to cultural identities was a taboo.
ASHA came about because of the voices of Black women survivors in the community that didn't want to access services outside the community. And I was employed by a mainstream program, and I was conducting domestic violence restraining orders in the courthouse. And we were seeing, if we saw 700-800 women a month, 75% were African American. And at that time, I was the only Black advocate in the courthouse. So if they were talking to me, if they were angry, gesticulating, just animated and talking about, you better get him, you better do this, he keeps doing this, you can't stop him. Well, for me, I'm like, girl, what else he do? But it was intimidating to mainstream program staff. So that there was this whole thing around having a visceral connection within the community, understanding the language, understanding the nuance, and understanding what is aggressive, whereas mainstream provider might say they're aggressive, or justification why she is abused. I can see why he beat your behind, because you loud, you cussing, you doing all of this or that. But I didn't take it as that because I'm a product of this community. I lived and grew up within this community and around these voices.
And it sparked something in Antonia, that there were other women in other communities experiencing some of the darkest moments in their lives that also needed someone to just see them in their language.
But that initial work, I tore up some cars and lived on aircraft and practically lived in Washington, presenting arguments for the need to develop funding for culturally specific services. And I never wanted to be the only one. We're still the only one here in Milwaukee that is culturally specific to African American programs. But one of the things that we did was that we brought together the other 6 culturally specific programs that are led by people of color.
The We Are Here MKE collective, made up of orgs like Gerald Ignace Indian Health Center, the HIR Wellness Institute, and others, the Latino Resource Center, Milwaukee Muslim Women's Center, Diverse and Resilient for those that identify as LGBTQ+, and the Hmong American Women's Association.
Why don't I take y'all upstairs to look at the Baying project first, and then we'll come back down.
Okay. Beautiful stairwell here. Look at that. This nice big window. We're at the Hmong American Women's Association. That voice leading us is Vina Zhang. She's the Director of Education and Outreach. We land at a beautiful tapestry that's a memorial for Hmong women lost to DV in Wisconsin.
This is where we hang our Baying project. A lot of the second floor is just office spaces, but we hang the Baying project right here. Yeah.
Could you describe sort of what it kind of looks like?
Yeah, so the Baying project, I don't even know the size of it, but so it has a pandao border, which is just like an embroider, like a tribal print embroider that is on the border of the cloth. And then the picture itself on the cloth is, you see mountains, you also see the sky, and then you see a couple of Hmong figures all throughout the mountains. And then we have poppy flowers hung up, scattered around the picture itself. You will see some poppy flowers have like a smaller flower on it, some is just an individual poppy flower. And each poppy flower that's put up actually represents a Hmong woman who has passed due to domestic violence. And then every poppy flower that has a small one on it, it represents that at the time of their death, either a family member or a friend who was there also passed along with them. And so that's how we recognize each poppy flower and what it means when it's hung up on there.
All the advocates here are Hmong and understand the nuances that come with the patriarchal structures in their culture.
One, when Hmong women come to our organization, us knowing that they actually came here not as their first choice, but as a last choice, because the community hasn't helped them in the way that they need to be helped.
Nuances, like who will oversee your funeral proceedings if you choose to leave your husband.
The Hmong community is still very patriarchal. They still follow the system of following the men, being the men as the head of the household. And so a lot of what we do culturally and the beliefs, they follow the men being the leader to make all the decisions. And so I think one of the things that a lot of women point to is funeral rites. So if they've passed away, then they need someone who's like a male or head of the household to hold the funeral for them. And so a lot of women end up going back is because they want their funeral rites to be completed. And so I would say that's like one of the biggest examples too of understanding mainly why Hmong women do go back to their harm doer is because they want to have that sense of resting after they've passed.
Another nuance, a different system of accountability.
So the Hmong people have the 18 clan, 18 last names, and I think they've chosen 18 men to be the leaders of our community-wise. So they have made rules and policies about how Hmong folks should practice some of our cultures and beliefs.
Vina's referring to the traditional Hmong 18 clan system that provides guidance and support for the betterment and preservation of Hmong people. And this includes guidance and influence over issues like marriage, the treatment of women, and cultural practices that are part of Hmong life.
So I know when I mentioned earlier how the community maybe have limited resources or unable to help them in the way that the victim needs help. A lot of times it's because they go through their relatives. They go to the 18 clan to have negotiations that doesn't really work out in their favor and doesn't stop the domestic violence. Then they come to us.
Negotiations, meaning both parties meet and discuss solutions. The council, giving recommendations, resolve conflict and avert crises. But Vina says many of their clients seek their services when those interventions didn't stop the abuse. This council is a mediator between the people and law enforcement, which many of Hawa's clients want to avoid entirely for a variety of reasons.
A lot of Hmong folks, they don't call the police either. One, because they might not speak the language, so they don't know what's going to happen if they call the police. They don't fully understand the process of maybe what calling and explaining and what it looks like. And then I think just being like a minority in the US too, and being afraid in a way of calling law enforcement and then maybe getting themselves in trouble could be a problem with that too. And I know a lot of the women that we help with, they aren't US citizens, they only have their green cards. So I think being a green card holder, they are also unaware and also afraid of what that could impact for them if they do call the police on their abuser.
Vita notices that for many of their clients, little to no knowledge of their legal options is a big concern. But language barriers and immigration status tend to be the real deterrent from even trying.
And we quickly became known, I think, because of the extent to which we supported our clients and survivors. Many had a lot of things going against them, no language. They sometimes didn't have their paperwork in place because their husbands did not apply for them and they were not aware of that. They didn't drive.
This is Janan Najib, founder and executive director of the Milwaukee Muslim Women's Coalition. Their DV's survivor program, Our Peaceful Home, runs into similar issues with their clients. Basama Yassin is the program coordinator and says the language barriers can play a role in who's seen as the victims. Many times, in her experience, law enforcement taking the word of whoever speaks better English.
I call it a luck of the draw. Sometimes we've called the district and you get a great officer responding and doing their best to understand and help us. Unfortunately, many times you get police officers that don't quite understand what is happening. Maybe they don't put too much importance on the situation. Because of the language barrier, they tend to side with the one who knows English and speaks English and can communicate their point of view better. We had a situation where we were called from the hospital where the victim was there getting help from the abuse, where the advocate in the hospital then was telling me they're putting handcuffs on her and they're trying to take her. And we called our interpreter, started speaking to them. Long story short, they ended up finally taking him and arresting him. But they had come in with thinking she abused him because that's what he told them, and he was calm and he was speaking English and he showed some cuts, scratches, and she was overly emotional, as you would get if somebody has just beat you, and screaming and yelling, and they couldn't understand anything that they were saying.
In 2020, my son called the police. My son is the one who did the talking. My son just told the police officer that my dad hit my mom. He took pictures. The police sent a paper with a number that I needed to call for a restraining order, but I didn't know anything about that.
This is Dara. We're using a different name and a voice actor to maintain her privacy. She got referred to Our Peaceful Home by her English as a second language teacher after her husband had beaten her so badly she had to go to the hospital.
My family grew up really poor in Cambodia, so I ended up leaving Cambodia and then went to Malaysia to work as a maid, basically so I could send the money to the parents. I met my husband there, we got married and had 2 kids. Then we came to the United States as refugees.
She had hopes of coming to America with her family, going to school, finding her version of an American dream. And maybe that fresh start could alleviate some of her and her husband's marital problems.
I thought when we left Malaysia, things would get better. That he will stop cheating, stop gambling, stop drinking and clubbing. But in 2020, he started drinking again and hitting me. I wanted to go to school, but he said no to everything. The only thing he wanted me to do was stay home and take care of the house. All his money was for himself.
Dara, trying to find a way out from under the thumb of physical and financial abuse for a better life for her and her kids.
I see us as kind of a wraparound service where we take care of that issue, but we want to make sure their children are well. We want to make sure that they have all the steps to thrive. We get them into transitional housing. And we have so many phenomenal success stories when you think about all of the strikes they have against them, and then to be able to succeed and succeed so well.
The advocates helped Dara apply for emergency funds during COVID for victims experiencing domestic abuse. They also helped her successfully apply for a restraining order.
After I filed the restraining order, he wanted me to suffer, so he cut access to everything. He cut the water off, the gas in the house. He wanted to sell the car as well. Basically, he just wanted revenge.
The help our peaceful home offers is both short and long term, depending on the need.
Right now, we are close to a little over 100.
Wow.
Yeah. And like Janan says, a lot of people have closed cases, and we do have those. But a lot of those we officially still consider open, because as long as they contact us for one thing or another, it's considered an open case. And so a lot of these clients that we've had for 2-3 years will still call us and say, I got this in the mail, I don't quite understand it.
And these concerns aren't just related to escaping violence. It's really to help maintain a sustainable life post-violence. Advocates becoming chosen family for many women who lose support and contact with family members when speaking out about their abuse.
Women like Dara, left alone, in a different country, little English, and really no community.
This isn't my hometown. I can't speak my own language. If I have a problem, these people will talk to me in my language. It's easier. This support system makes it easier as well because they are like my family, because I'm alone.
The women that seek our resources usually do not have, and that's why many of our client testimonials that we call them, the consistent phrase is, you are my family, you are my family, you've become my family. I feel like I'm with family. That's something they keep saying over and over because they don't have anybody.
And I think that I was just telling Mariana, I said, one of our clients' kid, who is no longer a kid, he's 25, came to see me with his baby. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I'm like, how old are you? And he's like, Dama, I'm 25. And I said, wait, what? I'm like, there's no way.
Damaris Becker has been an advocate for domestic violence survivors for over 2 decades and is one of the founders of the Latina Resource Center. She's seen a lot of families come and go over the years.
Those stories of like the kids that we took care of while mom was at an injunction at one point when we didn't have nobody to take care of the kids. The child sitting in my lap while I'm like typing something because mom is, being interviewed by an officer. Those are the ones that really stick to me. And I still have contact with a lot of those kids and a lot of the clients. Like they come back and they're like, oh, I just bought a house and I just got remarried and he's amazing. And I love to hear that. I love to hear that. The cases that stick with me the most are those who have been able to free themselves from their perpetrators, but also have their kids not reliving that trauma and ending that cycle of domestic violence.
Like many of the agencies we spoke to, she says you can't really end a cycle of violence without taking into account all the outside factors that could be hindering a victim's chances of thriving after leaving the abuse. And for many Latinx survivors, immigration status is a part of that conversation.
Again, it's about really working with victims and understanding where they're coming from. We have seen a spike of asylum seekers, and that has been very difficult as well because they come from a history of countries where femicide is a true, real thing. and it happens to them daily. And then they come here with their partners that they have been knowing in their own country, and then they start abusing them, and they have a lot of challenges because if they come in as a family seeking asylum, they want to kind of like have the idea of like, we're going to remain together because if I report him, he's going to end up being deported. And then in their country, again, they have a lot of challenges. So those clients is very difficult. So I think that often in those mainstream agencies, which are very much needed, right? They have that high volume coming in. But when it's cultural specific, not all of our victims want to be surrounded by a police officer or a detective. And because it's all in one building, it often brings anxiety to victims. We know historically, brown and black communities don't trust officers. They don't trust a detective. So they often feel threatened in entering these places when it comes to reporting.
And while a culturally specific approach may have required a great many doors to get kicked down, the results show that better connection yields better results. In these cases, those results are lives saved. Here's Antonia again.
Yeah, it was a lot of work. It was a lot of work. It was some hard times because mainstream came at me. I was pulling knives out my back. I still do. But I had to keep going.
I think that we were fought for many years of cultural specific services and why was that important for our community. And again, it took a lot of education and a lot of other grantors or people in important spaces seeing that maybe this specific community was not going to work with this one. But if they work with their own community, we might have a better chance of prosecuting and them trusting the system, which we've seen that we have. I mean, yes, we take 10 steps forward and like 5 back, but we continue allowing these providers to learn from us. And I say allowing because it's a privilege.
Because although their cultural backgrounds vary, these advocates, like Carrie, share a heart for returning peace to where it was once lost.
When our clients and patients come to us, I really do take it personal. I look at them like they are a family member because my family members have to jump through the hoops, through the barriers of trying to get seen and trying to be heard. And we do that here. So I don't want to fail them in yet another system because we are a system regardless of we're culturally specific. We are a system. I don't want us to be that system to where you come here and you're waiting in the hallway for someone to come and see you or the phone calls go unanswered. Like, we can't help you here. So I look at them like they're myself, my mother, my grandparents, my children.
If you or someone you know is going through a crisis or need help, call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 800-799-7233. Resources specific to Milwaukee can be found in our show notes.
On the next episode of The Missing Piece.
We don't have the capacity to staff every single high-risk case in this community. We just couldn't. We'd have to meet every day, all day long, right, to do that. And so we can't. So really this team's focus is on the cases that have been identified to be at the absolute highest risk for homicide. So not just high risk, but they're kind of on that next tier where we're concerned there's going to be an imminent loss of life because of the violence and abuse that's happening.
5 years, 3,100 cases, 1 death. We learn about a team working to prevent the most violent domestic violence cases from eventually turning fatal.
The Missing Piece is hosted and produced by Alexandria Mack and Scotty Lee Myers. Other members of our team include sound engineer Grant Martin, engineering manager Arlene Giuliani-Kazorik, and digital content manager Carol Burns.
Thank you to Majda Syed Hussein for providing voice acting in today's episode.
Thanks for listening. If you're a fan of this reporting, please subscribe to the podcast and leave a rating. You'll hear from us again soon for episode 6 of The Missing Piece.